On June 18, 2026, archaeologists announced a discovery only 5 kilometers from Stonehenge that changed the story before the first stone was ever raised. Beneath a military training area near Bulford, they had found the remains of 2 enormous wooden posts placed about 120 meters apart. The posts were gone, but the holes survived. When researchers reconstructed the ancient horizon, the line between them pointed toward the summer solstice sunrise in one direction and the winter solstice sunset in the other. The structure appeared to be around 500 years older than Stonehenge's famous stone circle. Suddenly, the monument on Salisbury Plain no longer looked like the beginning of a great idea. It looked like the final version of an idea people had been testing for generations. That is the real point where the modern reanalysis of Stonehenge begins. Not with a computer announcing that it had solved 5,000 years of mystery, and not with an artificial intelligence discovering a hidden machine beneath the grass. No peer-reviewed study has shown that Grok, or any other chatbot, was given every Stonehenge record and found an impossible lunar code, a secret infrasound weapon, or a precise decline in ancient engineering. Those claims sound powerful because they mix real names and real archaeology with invented measurements, but the genuine evidence is far more disturbing in a different way. Digital mapping, isotope chemistry, acoustic modeling, geophysical surveys, radiocarbon statistics, and mineral fingerprinting are revealing that Stonehenge was not one monument built by one local community. It was the center of a network stretching across Britain, created over centuries by people who moved stones, animals, ideas, and even the dead across distances that once seemed impossible. The 2 post holes at Bulford matter because they prove the landscape was already being used to observe the sun long before the giant sarsens were erected. The people who dug those holes did not need telescopes, written equations, or modern clocks. They needed patience, memory, and a clear horizon. By watching where the sun rose and set across the year, they could identify the 2 extremes of its movement. That knowledge could be passed from one gathering to the next. The posts may have framed a ritual space, guided seasonal ceremonies, or acted as markers for people arriving at important times of the year. Whatever their exact purpose, the discovery showed that Stonehenge's famous solar alignment was not a sudden invention. It belonged to a much older tradition. This changes the emotional scale of the site. Imagine a child attending a midsummer gathering at Bulford around 3,000 years before the Common Era. The wooden posts are already standing, fires burn, animals are slaughtered. People arrive from neighboring settlements. The sun rises exactly where elders said it would. That child grows old and the posts decay. Another generation replaces them or builds something new. Centuries later, descendants of those communities cut a circular ditch at Stonehenge. Later still, other people drag stones from Wales and northern Wiltshire. The finished monument is not the work of one brilliant planner. It is the result of an idea surviving longer than any single human life. Stonehenge itself began around 3000 BCE as a circular earthwork. Workers dug a ditch using antler picks and piled the chalk into banks. Just inside that enclosure, they created 56 pits now called the Aubrey Holes. The viral AI story claims the unequal distances between these pits form a perfect wave, matching the moon's 18.6-year nodal cycle. There is no verified study showing that. The number 56 has inspired lunar theories for decades, and some researchers have suggested that stones or posts could have been moved around the ring to track eclipses or long lunar cycles. But the purpose of the holes remains debated. Their spacing is not a newly discovered computer code, and archaeologists do not agree that 56 represents 3 lunar cycles rounded into a calendar. The real evidence inside the Aubrey Holes is more human. Some of them held cremated remains. Stonehenge became one of the largest known late Neolithic cremation cemeteries in Britain. During excavations in the early 20th century, William Hawley recovered many deposits of burned bone. In 1935, much of that material was reburied in Aubrey Hole 7. When archaeologists opened the hole again in 2008, they found the remains had become mixed together, making individual burial locations difficult to reconstruct. Later analysis identified at least 25 people in the recovered sample, while earlier records suggest that the wider site contained many more burials. This fact destroys another dramatic claim from the viral script. Researchers cannot map 9 specific Welsh individuals onto exact acoustic pressure points because the cremated bones had been mixed after excavation and reburial. The burials do not prove that people were intentionally placed where invisible sound forces were strongest. What they do prove is that death was part of Stonehenge from its earliest phase. Before the tall sarsens, before the continuous ring of lintels, before the monument became the image recognized around the world, people were already bringing selected remains into this enclosure. Stonehenge began as a place of memory. Then scientists found something inside the burned bones that fire had failed to erase. Cremation normally destroys tooth enamel, which is often used to trace where a person grew up. But intense heat can make bone resistant to later contamination, preserving strontium isotope ratios linked to food eaten during the final years of life. In 2018, researchers analyzed cremated bone from 25 people buried at Stonehenge. At least 10 had isotope values inconsistent with the chalk landscape around Salisbury Plain. West Wales, where many of Stonehenge's bluestones came from, was one plausible match. The finding did not prove that all 10 people were born beside a Welsh quarry. Strontium values can match more than one region, and bone reflects roughly the last decade of food rather than childhood alone. Yet the connection was powerful. Some of the dead may have traveled from Western Britain. Others may have been cremated far away and brought to Stonehenge as fragments of bone. The same monument contained stones carried from Wales, and people whose life histories were also consistent with Wales. The distance between the Preseli region and Stonehenge was not an empty barrier. It was part of a route along which communities remained connected. The bluestones are smaller than the sarsens, but calling them small can be misleading. Many weigh between 2 and 4 tons. Geological work has traced different examples to specific outcrops in the Preseli Hills and nearby areas of West Wales, more than 200 kilometers away. The exact route remains uncertain. The stones may have been carried over land, moved down rivers, transported by sea, or taken along a mixed route. Experiments show that organized groups using ropes, timber, sledges, and prepared tracks can move heavy loads. The question is not whether human beings could move them. The question is why they believe the journey was necessary. One theory proposes that some bluestones first stood in a Welsh stone circle at Wan Mawn and were later taken east by migrating communities. Evidence for a dismantled circle exists, but the claim that it supplied Stonehenge remains disputed. Some archaeologists think the dates and stone holes support the idea. Others argue the match has been pushed too far. This debate is important because it shows how science actually works. A pattern may be exciting without being final. Researchers compare shapes, dates, geology, and landscape, then challenge one another. There is no machine capable of removing uncertainty from incomplete ground. The largest surprise came from the altar stone, a massive sandstone slab lying near the center of Stonehenge. For years, many experts assumed it came from Wales with the bluestones. In 2024, researchers examined tiny mineral grains from fragments linked to the stone. Zircon, apatite, and rutile carried geological age signatures, like a mineral barcode. The closest match was not in Wales. It was in the Orcadian Basin of northeast Scotland. The stone had probably traveled at least 750 kilometers, nearly the length of Britain. This was not an AI prediction. It was a geochemical result built from microscopic crystals that formed hundreds of millions or even billions of years before Stonehenge. Those crystals recorded the ancient rocks that supplied sand to the formation from which the altar stone was cut. When scientists compared their age patterns with geological basins across Britain, northeast Scotland stood out. The result made the old transport problem much larger. A 6-ton stone had somehow moved from the far north to Salisbury Plain during the Neolithic period. Could a glacier have carried it south before people arrived? A 2026 study tested the broader glacial explanation by analyzing zircon and apatite in modern sediments around Stonehenge. The evidence indicated that Salisbury Plain remained unglaciated during the Pleistocene, and that the local sediment came from southern British sources rather than northern ice. This made direct glacial delivery of the megaliths unlikely. The most reasonable conclusion is that people moved the altar stone, although the precise route and even the exact quarry remain unknown. An overland journey would have crossed rivers, hills, forests, and difficult terrain. A coastal route would have required boats or rafts capable of carrying a dangerous load through changing seas. Either possibility demands planning across regions. People had to know the stone existed. They had to select it, separate it, move it to water or a prepared route, feed workers, repair equipment, and coordinate communities along the way. One accident could lose the stone and kill the crew. The altar stone is not evidence of lost machines. It is evidence that Neolithic Britain was far more connected and organized than the word primitive allows. Its Scottish origin also changes the meaning of Stonehenge. The monument now appears to gather material from different ends of Britain. Bluestones from Wales, sarsens from southern England, and a central stone from northeast Scotland. Some researchers have suggested that this combination symbolized political or cultural unity. That remains an interpretation, not a proven inscription, but the geography is impossible to ignore. Stonehenge may have mattered because it brought distant landscapes into one circle. Each stone could have represented people, ancestors, sacred places, alliances, or memories that existed far beyond Salisbury Plain. The sarsens, forming the famous outer circle and central trilithons, came from much closer, but their movement was still extraordinary. Geochemical analysis has linked most of them to West Woods in the Marlborough Downs, about 25 kilometers north. Some upright stones weigh around 20 to 30 tons. The largest surviving stones rise more than 7 meters above the ground when their buried sections are included. Builders shaped them with hammerstones, created mortise and tenon joints, and fitted curved lintels together using tongue and groove connections. Those techniques resemble woodworking translated into stone. Laser scanning has shown that the stones facing the monument's main axis were worked more carefully than some of the hidden surfaces. This suggests builders understood how the monument would be seen. The outer sarsen ring was intended to appear continuous, with lintels forming a level circle even though the ground and stones varied. Creating that visual line required selection and adjustment. Yet there is no verified database showing that the earliest stones were positioned to an average error of 3, 2 centimeters, and later stones missed by 12, 7 centimeters. No accepted study proves that knowledge declined fourfold. Stonehenge changed because builders altered plans, reused stones, and worked during different periods, not because a machine measured the depth of an advanced science. The acoustic claims also contain a real discovery buried beneath false details. In 2020, researchers at the University of Salford built a detailed 1 to 12 scale model representing Stonehenge when it was more complete, with 157 stones. They placed the model in a special room designed to reduce outside reflections and used high-frequency sound scaled to behave like normal sound inside the full-size monument. The results showed that the stones increased speech levels by roughly 4 decibels and created a reverberation time of around 2/3 of a second in the middle frequencies. This means voices and music inside the circle would have sounded stronger and more resonant than they did on the open plain. Sound was also less able to escape outside. People gathered within the stones could hear one another more clearly, while those outside received a weaker signal. The monument may therefore have created an intimate acoustic space, separating participants from observers, but the study did not discover a 95 to 120 frequencies in that range or audible bass, not infrasound, which lies below about 20 hertz. The researchers did not claim that Stonehenge caused hallucinations or that cremations were placed at pressure nodes. The real acoustic effect is more believable and perhaps more powerful. Astronomy remains central. The Great Stone Phase, built around 2500 BCE, was aligned with the solstices. Looking northeast along the monument's axis, the summer sun rises near the heel stone. Looking in the opposite direction, the midwinter sun sets between the great uprights. Many archaeologists consider the winter alignment especially important because animal remains at nearby Durrington walls indicate large feasts around midwinter. The shortest day marks the point when darkness stops increasing and the sun begins its return. For farming communities, that moment could carry practical, emotional, and sacred importance. The moon is more difficult. The rectangle formed by the station stones has long been linked to extreme lunar rising and setting positions. During a major lunar standstill, which occurs every 18.6 years, the moon reaches unusually far north and south on the horizon. English Heritage has supported a modern observation project to investigate these possible alignments. Yet the evidence does not prove Stonehenge functioned as a precise lunar computer. Horizon features, missing stones, construction phases, and the wide range of possible sightlines make accidental alignments a serious concern. Ancient people certainly watched the moon, but their exact method and purpose remain open questions. The landscape around Stonehenge is now producing even larger patterns. Stonehenge was not a lonely temple in an empty field. It belonged to a ceremonial landscape shaped over thousands of years. The most dramatic discovery was a ring of giant pits around Durrington Walls and Woodhenge, several kilometers from Stonehenge. First announced in 2020 and investigated further in 2025, the pits form a circuit more than 2 kilometers across. Many reach roughly 5 meters or more in depth and up to 10 meters in width. New coring, sediment analysis, optically stimulated luminescence dating, soil chemistry, and environmental DNA strengthened the conclusion that they were human-made and late Neolithic. Digging these pits required an astonishing amount of labor, but they were not houses, wells, or ordinary quarries. Researchers think they may have marked a huge boundary around Durrington Walls, creating a controlled sacred zone. A person moving through the landscape might not see the whole circle, but each pit could act as a warning or marker. The design did not require an aerial view. Surveyors can create large circles by using ropes, repeated distances, central reference points, and lines of sight. The result still proves careful planning over a scale that was once underestimated. Durrington Walls also contained a major settlement. Houses, hearths, pottery, animal bones, and food waste show that people gathered there in large numbers. Pig remains indicate feasting, and isotope studies suggest animals arrived from different parts of Britain. Stonehenge may have been associated with ancestors and the dead, while Durrington Walls represented timber, houses, feasting, and the living. The River Avon connected the two. The avenue leading from Stonehenge toward the river may have formed part of a ceremonial route between worlds. This helps explain why Stonehenge cannot be decoded by studying its stones alone. Its meaning may have depended on movement. People approached along certain routes, watched the sun appear between markers, traveled beside the river, gathered for food, carried remains, and entered spaces controlled by banks, pits, timber circles, and stone. The monument was an event as much as an object. A modern photograph freezes it, but Neolithic experience unfolded through sound, weather, crowds, fire, darkness, distance, and time. The claim that all activity stopped suddenly around 1600 BCE and the site was deliberately sealed like a machine is unsupported. Stonehenge's main construction and burial traditions changed gradually. Some stones fell later, others were removed. People continued visiting the landscape in different periods. A late 8th or 9th century execution burial found at the monument shows that Anglo-Saxon communities also used the ancient site, perhaps as a place of punishment or authority. The name Stonehenge itself may relate to hanging or gallows. The monument was not locked away for 34 centuries. Its meaning kept changing. Even its present appearance is partly modern. During the 20th century, fallen stones were raised, straightened, and set in concrete for safety. Earlier, visitors chipped pieces from the monument. Excavations disturbed features and sometimes reburied material in ways that later complicated research. Digital models must therefore separate Neolithic construction, ancient collapse, medieval activity, antiquarian damage, and modern restoration. An AI trained on measurements without this context could produce a beautiful but false pattern. That is the central danger in the viral reanalysis story. Artificial intelligence is excellent at finding correlations, including meaningless ones. Give a system thousands of distances, angles, dates, burials, frequencies, and astronomical events, and it can always discover combinations that appear unlikely. If researchers test enough possible patterns, real archaeology demands that a hypothesis be defined clearly, tested against independent evidence, compared with alternatives, and published so other experts can challenge it. A chatbot announcing that probability is effectively zero is not a scientific result. AI may still transform Stonehenge research. Machine learning can classify geophysical signals, identify faint marks in LiDAR data, compare stone surfaces, reconstruct missing pieces, and search archives. Computer vision can track erosion or detect carvings. Algorithms can test transport routes under different assumptions and compare thousands of landscape alignments. But these tools do not remove the need for excavation, chemistry, dating, and human interpretation. A buried anomaly can be a prehistoric pit, a modern trench, a geological feature, or a processing error. The machine finds the shape. Archaeology must explain it. And when the unsupported claims are removed, the verified story becomes larger. A solar tradition began before the famous stones. A cemetery developed inside the early earthwork. Some of the cremated people came from outside the local chalk region. Bluestones traveled from West Wales. The altar stone crossed at least 750 kilometers from northeast Scotland. Huge sarsens arrived from West Woods. A massive ring of pits defined space around Durrington walls. The completed circle changed the way speech and music sounded. None of this requires a lost civilization. It requires communities capable of maintaining knowledge and relationships across Britain for centuries. The people who built Stonehenge were farmers, but the word farmer should not be confused with simple. They understood timber, rope, stone, animals, weather, soil, rivers, and the sky. They could organize seasonal labor beyond one village. They could preserve a plan across generations without written blueprints. They could choose materials for reasons that may have been social and sacred rather than practical. They did not need modern science to observe repeated events or engineer heavy loads. Their knowledge was different from ours, but different is not inferior. The hardest finding to explain is not a perfect sine wave hidden in 56 holes. It is the willingness of people to move a 6-ton stone across almost the entire length of Britain. It is the decision to bring Welsh rocks into a landscape already filled with local monuments. It is the effort required to dig giant pits that may never have held water or buildings. It is the preservation of a solar axis for centuries before the stone circle reached its final form. These decisions point toward beliefs powerful enough to command labor, travel, and sacrifice, yet those beliefs were never written down. Stonehenge therefore remains silent in the one place where we most want an answer. Science can tell us where a stone formed, approximately when a ditch was dug, what food a person ate, and how a voice echoed between uprights. It can reveal networks and dates that no antiquarian could imagine, but it cannot yet tell us the words spoken in the circle, the names of the people buried there, or why one distant stone mattered more than another. The data grows sharper while the central human meaning remains just beyond reach. The discovery at Bulford deepens that silence. Those two vanished posts show that people were watching the same solstice line before Stonehenge's stone architecture existed. The tradition was already old when the monument became permanent. Perhaps Stonehenge was an attempt to turn memory into something that could not rot. Timber posts died. Generations died. Stories changed. Stone offered the possibility that one alignment, one gathering place, and one link with the ancestors could survive. But even stone failed to remain complete. Half the original monument is missing or fallen. The builders left no readable explanation. What survives is enough to prove extraordinary connection, but not enough to close the mystery. Modern technology has not solved Stonehenge. It has made the simple explanations impossible. The monument was not only a calendar, only a cemetery, only a temple, or only a political symbol. It appears to have been all of those things at different moments inside a landscape that was constantly rebuilt. So when someone says artificial intelligence finally decoded Stonehenge, the most important question is not what the machine found. It is whether the finding exists outside the video claiming it. The real research does not need fictional experts, impossible precision, or hidden frequencies. Mineral grains have already carried one stone back to Scotland. Burned bone has already traced people toward Wales. Buried pits have already expanded the monument across kilometers. Sound models have already shown that the stone circle changed human voices, and 2 empty holes near Bulford have already pushed the idea of Stonehenge 5 centuries deeper into the past. The final mystery is now more powerful than the false solution. If communities from Scotland, Wales, and southern England were connected through the monument, what held that network together? Was Stonehenge a place where separate groups became one people, a sanctuary where ancestors gave authority to the living, or a center built to stabilize a changing world through the movement of the sun? The stones record the reach of the builders, but not their reason. And until archaeology finds a new piece of evidence that connects material, people, and belief, Stonehenge will continue doing what it has done for 5,000 years, revealing exactly how much we can measure, while protecting the one answer we still cannot hear.